Water is amazing.
Life's an everyday adventure. That's my philosophy. For some reason, my mother really loves water. Not only does she drink a lot of water, but she also loves to be near water. Today we decided to go to a lake, her favorite lake.
We don't live near an ocean, but luckily we can drive to the most beautiful lake I've ever seen,
my mother said as we packed up a delicious picnic. We decided not to play I Spy this time because my father wanted to read his mystery book. "What's the mystery about?" I asked. I love mysteries. He gave me a mysterious look and said,
"Who stole the famous painting from the museum?"
I quickly responded, Oh, I wish I could read it and figure out who did it."
"Soon enough, Miss Molly, soon enough,"
my father said as he smiled and winked. Next, my mother told us about the book she was reading.
"I'm reading a wonderful book about the life of a real queen."
My imagination soared as she told us more details.
She was a young and beautiful princess when she became the youngest queen ever. I've just gotten to the part where she decided to marry for love, but I don't know yet to whom.
My mother continued. I couldn't wait to hear what would happen next, but I knew I'd have to wait for my mother to finish her book. I was thinking so much about the two stories that I didn't notice we had arrived at the lake. Well, we had arrived at the entrance anyway. It's a long walk through the trees to get to the lake. Walking on the path to the lake through the tall forest was amazing. The sun sparkled through the trees as my toes sparkled and tingled in my moccasins. Then we arrived at a big open green meadow. I imagined us as a family of deer hopping through the meadow. I giggled to myself as we walked. Finally, we arrived. We set out our blanket and rested for a bit. It was great. The sun was shining, the water was twinkling, and we were happy. Then my mind began to race with questions about water. Why was this called a lake and not an ocean? What's a pond? What's a stream? Why isn't this a river? I popped up and stepped closer to the edge of the water. I thought maybe if I took a better look, I could figure it out. Oh, wow, a lily pad with a frog. Hey, look at the dragonflies. Fish, I said rather loudly. My father got up too and stood next to me. Finally, I had to ask, what makes this a lake and not an ocean or a river?
"Excellent question, Miss Molly,"
my father said proudly. Then he began to explain. He told me that the Earth is 70% water, which means more than half of the planet is water. Then he said that water comes in many forms. It can be above ground like this lake, but it can also be underground or in the center of a mountain or even frozen in a glacier.
"Water is everywhere, but it is not always the same. This is a lake because it is a large body of water that is surrounded by land,"
my father said as we dipped our toes into the lake. He also said that lakes are important because they are drinking spots for many creatures. We already noticed the frogs and dragonflies, but when we looked around, there were lots of birds and ducks playing in the water too. We began to get a little hungry, so we went back to our blanket for our picnic lunch. We told my mother what we were talking about, and she made a game out of it. So with each bite, we were to name an animal that would drink from the lake. We named bears, foxes, beavers, hawks, elephants, tigers, and even giraffes. There was no end to the list because every animal, bird, and even insect needs water. I usually drink water from a glass, but I had never thought about where animals get their water. Cool. We talked more about the different types of bodies of water. My father explained that a pond is usually just a smaller lake. He also told me that most are freshwater lakes or ponds, but some are filled with salt water, like the ocean. Next, we spoke about rivers and streams. Rivers are usually long bodies of water that connect bigger bodies of water, like lakes or oceans. They flow in one direction as they carry the water from one place to the next. Streams are just very small rivers. Animals drink from rivers and streams too. My father then told me about oceans. They are made up of salt water and are so huge that they surround almost all of the land on Earth. Seas are just smaller parts of the big oceans. Then my father began to speak in a quiet voice.
Oceans are also quite mysterious. No one really knows what is at the bottom, or where the bottom is in some places, or what kind of creatures live at the bottom.
I had chills thinking about all of the wild things that could be living in the deep, dark ocean. The sun was beginning to set, so we packed up. On the way home, I had a burning question. I know people and animals need water, but what about fish? Do they drink water, or do they just live there? My mother answered,
Excellent question, Sweet Pea. Yes, fish need water too. Some fish drink water through their mouths, and other fish absorb water through their skin.
By the time we arrived home, I was incredibly thirsty. As I drank my glass of water, I had a whole new appreciation for water. Water is amazing. It comes in many forms, and we can't live without it. Molly Moccasins, everyday adventurer.